This week, you're going to hear about this really interesting case about the Supreme Court deciding about birthright citizenship. And that's because basically, right when Donald Trump became president, he issued this executive order that protecting the meaning and value of American citizenship essentially challenges what we call birthright citizenship. And what the Trump administration is claiming is that people who are born from a mother who was not lawfully present in the United States and the father was not a U.S. citizen, they won't become citizens. And you see a lot of people on the left and in the mainstream media just saying this is blatantly unconstitutional, that the Constitution is clear. And honestly, I can see how they would come to that conclusion without like a lot of legal nuance, because this is what it's based on. It's based on the 14th Amendment, which says all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. So we're going to come back to this, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, because this is why there's actually a lot more to this story than people think. Because as soon as Trump issued this, basically this federal judge blocked his order, which is leading to the Supreme Court taking it up. And we're going to talk about allegiance. It's really fascinating. And this issue is honestly pretty consequential because illegal immigrants give birth to almost 300,000 babies per year to the United States. And this is actually a few years ago. And taxpayers pay for a lot of those babies, and all these babies become citizens. And honestly, this issue has been going on for a while because you can see that the feds raided this maternity hotel. They call this birth tourism, because this birthright citizenship thing, where if you're just born here, you become a citizen, obviously it sets up a huge incentive for people to try to game the system. And this whole thing here, this happened in 2015 during the Obama administration. So this isn't just a Trump thing. And it's definitely not as simple as just, oh, the Constitution is clear. So this guy, Lyman Trumbull, he was a senator from Illinois, and he is basically the legal architect of all the 14th Amendment stuff. This happens in the late 1800s, right after the Civil War. Trumbull was an abolitionist. He was a key ally of Abraham Lincoln. And just for context, you got to think, Abraham Lincoln himself was a very smart attorney. So if he thought Trumbull was a good attorney, he probably was. And he was the chair of the Judiciary Committee during the American Civil War. You got to imagine that legal stuff happening during the Civil War was complex and very consequential. He wrote the legal basis for the Emancipation Proclamation, and basically his ideas led to the 14th Amendment. And a lot of what the 14th Amendment was doing was really ensuring that recently freed slaves were clearly made to be citizens of the United States. But Trumbull definitely knew that this would imply something about foreign nationals having babies and whether or not those babies were citizens. And the records show this. And the whole reason that we have this birthright citizenship practice in the United States is because of this case from the late 1800s called the United States versus Wong Kim Ark. And so basically, this guy, Wong Kim Ark, was born in the United States around 1871, and that year is going to be really important because basically the first real immigration policy that we ever had was this Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. So this act comes into law after this guy was born. And ultimately, the court decided that he was entitled to U.S. citizenship, and this case in the late 1800s is the whole basis for our legal understanding of birthright citizenship. But what Trumbull knew, and his partner in drafting the 14th Amendment, was that this phrase, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, was really important. And this is how we get into this concept of allegiance and citizenship. So you have to take a step back and think, like, what is American citizenship? Well, there are certain things that you as the citizen inherit, responsibilities and duties that, for example, when you take the citizenship oath, you make to the United States. For example, once you're a citizen, you can be drafted into the military, and the government can force you to go and serve the country in a military capacity. But if you're on a non-immigrant visa, like if you're a tourist, you're exempt. That's because tourists, their allegiance is to the other country, the country they came from, not to the United States. But if you're an American citizen, that also means that the government of the United States of America, has duties to you. So citizenship is reciprocal. It's basically a contract between the government and its citizens. And that's why it's important that when Wong Kim Ark was born in the United States, even though his parents weren't here as citizens, they were also not here illegally. Because if a person is here unlawfully, then this concept of jurisdiction changes. So basically, jurisdiction means what laws apply to you. And most of us think of jurisdiction as territorial, basically, where are you? But this paper from Georgetown Law says that clearly the drafters of the 14th Amendment intended a complete jurisdiction, the kind that brings with it a total and exclusive allegiance to be sufficient to qualify for the grant of citizenship. That's because whether somebody who is here illegally likes it or not, they still have allegiance to a foreign nation. And when you take the naturalization oath, meaning that you acquire American citizenship, you say that you renounce all allegiance to a foreign nation, basically, and that you make the true faith and allegiance to the United States, and that you will bear arms on behalf of the United States if required. But if you're here unlawfully by our laws, then our government has not yet agreed to bring you into the fold of citizenship. So that contract, that reciprocal contract between the government and the citizens is not present. And based on my research, Lyman Trumbull and the other person who drafted the 14th Amendment, they knew this. And honestly, again, in my research, it seems like Congress knows this too. Because in 2015, so before the Trump years, the Congressional Research Service had one of their attorneys review this exact issue. And the attorney said that the national law defines any person born within the United States if they have the allegiance to the United States as a citizen. And that's because this whole idea of birthright citizenship with Wong Kim Ark comes from a time when, even though his parents were not citizens of the United States, we allowed Chinese nationals to be in the nation primarily to do things like participate in the gold rush and build the railroads. He was born before they were here illegally, before this Exclusion Act of 1882. So it seems like if the Supreme Court focuses on this concept of allegiance and citizenship, they might let Trump's order on birthright citizenship become the new law of the land.